You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium, available on Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about Sam, the Sandown Clown. So it's over to you now, Mark, with no clowning around, please.
Sam the Sandown Clown, which was also known simply as the Sandown Clown, was a rather strange being which was encountered by two young children who were vacationing at Lake Common in Sandown on the Isle of Wight in the UK during the month of 1973. Following a noise that sounded like an ambulance siren, the children decided to wander across a footbridge over a stream. And then, somewhat to their surprise, they met a curious, unidentifiable being that they described as a cross between a clown, a robot, and an alien. In order to communicate with the children, the unidentifiable being would write in English using a pencil and a piece of paper, and upon it being asked what its name was by the little girl, it told her that its name was Sam, and that it was of all colours. Sam was a shy but friendly entity and communicated very kindly with the two children for almost half an hour before they then finally returned to their parents. There are, of course, several explanations as to what this entity called Sam could have been, with theories that include a human wearing a costume, a ghost, some other type of paranormal or supernatural creature, or that the children could have just made the whole story up. However, whatever it was after the children's encounter, it has never been seen again. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in again and listening to this alien sighting episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a medium, a ufologist, a true crime buff, and a man who is not only very dark and disturbed, period, but also a man who only found out the other day, when he brought a motorbike home, that the true colour of adrenaline is brown. And just in case that last remark does not give you a good idea of who I am, every week, usually on a Tuesday night, though occasionally on a Wednesday, allowing for bank holidays and busy weekends, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the Unexplained banner. These include things like ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of other paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, serial killers, the darker side of some past celebrities, and the occasional missing person that often goes unnoticed. So, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review or an opinion of this episode that I can reply to, a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell. Or, if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. And perhaps, if you get a few minutes, you might like to check out some of my social media groups as well, including Facebook and Instagram, which are filled daily with all things unexplained and crime. I'll put the links to some of my socials in the description. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the strange appearance surrounding Sam the Sandown Clown. And this week's necessary disclaimer. Well, to be honest with you listeners, this story is pretty much a PG, so sit back, relax with a coffee or a beer, and enjoy the listening experience. However, please remember that, as with all my shows, not only do you listen at your own discretion, but that all the opinions and comments are strictly my own, and that the facts of the case still remain. I also apologise again, as usual, if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English is my first and only language. But while I have your attention, I am proud to say that last week when I entered the World Kleptomaniac Championships, I not only took gold, but I took silver and bronze as well. But anyway, enough of this foolishness. Let us get back to the story. According to Wikipedia, Sandown itself is a seaside resort and civil parish on the southeast coast of the Isle of Wight in England, with the neighbouring resort of Shanklin and the settlement of Lake, which is a large village, being sited just to its south. And according to the 2021 census, Sandown has a population of 11,654, with the 3 Sandown-based settlements forming a built-up area of more than 20,000 inhabitants. Sandown is a bay, which is a broad open bay that stretches for much of the length of the Isle of Wight southeastern coast in the northernmost town, and has easily accessible and sandy beaches, which run continuously from the cliffs below the Battery Gardens in the south to the Yeverland in the north. Some of the most notable people who spent time at Sandown were the naturalist Charles Darwin, who at this time, whilst at the Sandown King's Head Hotel in the July of 1858, worked on the abstract which became the hardback book published in 1859 called The Origin of the Species. And amongst the late 20th century performers who were doing summer seasons at the Sandown Pier Pavilion were Cilla Black, Frankie Howard, Tommy Cooper, Jimmy Tarbuck and Dickie Henderson. And for all you cricket fans out there, it was also the home for the cricketer James Clutterbuck. As the names of the 2 children involved with the Sandown Clown case have been retracted on various other forms of literature, for this podcast I'm going to call them Fred and Becky. Well, our story first takes place one afternoon at around 4 p.m. in the May of 1973 near Lake Common, near Sandown Airport on the Isle of Wight in the UK, when our 2 young 7-year-old heroes, who, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to call Fred and Becky, decided to play near the lake when all of a sudden they heard noise that sounded a lot like an ambulance siren. Both being the young adventurous children that they were and intrigued by this strange sound, Fred and Becky then decided that they would go and investigate. And once the children reached a swampy area between the Shanklin and Sandown Golf Club and Sandown Airport, the strange sound suddenly stopped. When both Fred and Becky could find nothing of interest or nothing that could explain where the strange noise was coming from, the pair decided to continue their walk, which led them over a small footbridge and then into a brook or small stream. Once over the footbridge and deep within this brook, the young 7-year-olds then saw stood in front of them a figure who, according to both Fred and Becky, was at least 7 feet tall. They also described this tall, strange being as only having 3 fingers on each hand, no neck, triangular-shaped eyes, a square brown nose, yellow lips, antennae stuck out on either side of its head, with his head looking unnaturally wedged on top of his torso, like the appearance of a snowman, and limbs that looked like wooden slats. And again, according to the children, this tall, strange being was wearing distinctive white clown-like clothes, hence its nickname, which included a green tunic, white trousers, and a pointy yellow hat. Why not try drawing it and see what you get? apart from the pretty eccentric clobber that this tall and rather badly dressed entity was wearing, it also appeared to be carrying a book, and as the encounter between the children and the entity progressed, it started to communicate in a non-sequential manner, revealing his name by describing himself as All Colours Sam. The children, Fred and Becky, also noticed that attached to Sam was a black knobbed microphone with a white flex, and that he initially used this microphone to communicate with the children, although it was found later that he could also speak without it. However, Sam's speech was somewhat unclear, with his lips barely moving. So, the legend of Sam the Sandown Clown was born. After this first short break, in part 2 we will look at the further adventures of Fred, Becky and Sam the Sandown Clown.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could and has taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android, for only $3.99, to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
Once the two 7-year-old children, Fred and Becky and Sam the Sandown Clown, were all at ease with each other, they then started to have a conversation. Becky first asked Sam about his torn and unusual clothing, to which Sam told the children that they were his only clothes and that he had none to change into. The children then asked Sam, whilst noticing his distinctive white clown-like apparel, if he really was a man at all, to which he answered, and I quote,
"No.
Noticing his bemusement, the children then asked him if he was a ghost, but he followed this question by responding with the answer, and again I quote,
Well, not really, but I am in an odd sort of way."
And although he never elaborated on that particular question, he did reveal that there were others like him, and that at the same time, although he also admitted to being afraid of humans, he said that if he was attacked by people, he would not retaliate. The next question that the children asked Sam was a simple, "Who are you then?" to which Sam gave the rather cryptical response of, and I quote,
"You know."
with Sam only really providing vague answers as to who or what he really was. And despite the fact that he had already introduced himself as Sam, he did tell the children that he did not really have a name as such, and that there were others like him, with him even drawing a picture in the aforementioned book that he was carrying of another similar being. The three friends, which now consisted of Fred, Becky and Sam, became completely comfortable with each other's company, with the two children finding the clown being's demeanour to be shy but friendly. Whilst the three were chatting, Sam claimed to the children that in order for him to drink water from the stream, he had to clean it first, after which he then gathered some wild berries from the bushes to eat. The children noticed that when Sam tucked into his berry fest, he ate in a very strange manner, claiming that he would first place the berry in one ear, thrust his head forward, and somehow move the berries back and forth between one of his eyes and then down to his mouth. And after he had eaten, he then revealed, again to the children, that he lived on a diet of berries and water, and that they were all found locally, with him only eating in the late afternoons and always purifying the water before drinking it. What a fussy eater. Although, funnily enough, we once knew of another fussy eater called Sam many years ago, didn't we? Yes, yeah. I hope you're listening. After a time, Sam the Sandown Clown invited both the children into his metallic self-made hut, and upon accepting his kind invitation, the two youngsters followed him and entered through a small flap in the bushes. According to both Fred and Becky, Sam had built the interior of his hut on 2 levels, with the ground floor of the hut only having simple wooden furniture, an electric heater, and dominant-looking wallpaper, which was bluish-green in colour and a dial motif. However, the upper level of his hut had less headroom with a metallic floor. The trio of chums conversed for about another half an hour or so, whilst the children noticed aspects that reflected Sam the Sandown Clown's unconventional lifestyle, before it was time for the youngsters to return home. And Sam, being the lovable alien that he was, allowed both Fred and Becky to leave without any problems. En route back across the Shanklin and Sandown Golf Club, which was near Sandown Airport, the children encountered a passer-by and told him all about their engagement with what they referred to at the time as the friendly ghost. However, and to be honest with you, rather unsurprisingly, this passer-by was not convinced of their tale. In fact, despite both the children's insistence and their level of detail when describing their encounter with the strange being, most people didn't really believe them. And all this brief counter with Sam the Sandown Clown really did was leave the children with more questions than answers about who or what he truly was. It was about 3 weeks later, on the 2nd of June in 1973, when Becky decided to tell her father about the encounter with Sam the Sandown Clown. At first, her father, whose name has also been retracted from any media, didn't believe his daughter's story, but when he thought about the amount of detail she provided, for him, it gave her strange tale a kind of credence, or proof even, that it had some authenticity. Her father then, after he verified her story by visiting her companion Freddie, returned to the area where the children claimed to see the entity who went by the name of Sam. However, unfortunately, he couldn't find any sight of this being or his metallic self-made hut. He even went and spoke to some workers who were in the area at the time when the event happened, but they all stated that they saw no hut either. So Becky's father theorised, whilst believing the children's story to be true, that maybe this Sam took the children into some sort of alien bubble that hid them from the nearby workers, but at the same time allowed the three of them to interact. And to be honest, it really is no surprise that Becky's father would come to this sort of conclusion, because, as it transpires, he also had his own strange encounter, again on the Isle of Wight. So, what exactly happened to her father? Well, 3 years earlier, on the 20th of October in 1970, at around 7 p.m, whilst driving across the Isle of Wight to see a friend in Ryde, as he drove to the village of Bradding, he encountered something very strange, claiming that a large UFO, which was covered in red, turquoise and yellow lights, flew low to the ground nearby. So, being somewhat intrigued at the sight before him, and let's face it, who would not be, he then decided to stop the car and watch these strange craft move about. And, after a time, he then decided to drive on. However, looking in his rear-view mirror, he noticed that these strange craft started to follow him. After the UFO followed him for a while, he then stopped at his car to I'll try that one again. After the UFO followed him for a while, he then stopped his car, determined to face the craft. He grabbed his flashlight, exited his vehicle, and signalled for a short time with his torch, which then caused the UFO to hang idly in the sky, moving backwards and forwards. And once he had finished his game of UFO-related green light, red light, he then got back into his vehicle and drove the rest of the way to his destination. And once he had reached his friend's house in Ryde, whilst the UFO was still following him, he noticed that the craft was bobbing and weaving through treetops before it eventually disappeared. But the strangeness for Becky's father didn't just stop there. Oh no, because then on the 1st of March, 2 years later in 1972, whilst he was travelling on the Isle of Wight to go to another friend's house, he suddenly saw the water from the nearby Compton Bay begin to swell, with this water swelling phenomena forcing him to stop his vehicle and get out of his car over a nearby cliff. Once there, Becky's father then claimed that he saw a pair of yellow lights peering at him from just below the water's surface, and that once the yellow lights disappeared, the water retreated, and he then returned back to his vehicle. Several weeks after Fred and Becky had their encounter with Sam the Sandown Clown, and after the young girl mentioned it to her father, he then got in touch with the British UFO Research Association, or BUFORA for short. BUFORA then investigated the encounter by interviewing both the children and concluded that they were both being truthful, at least as best as they could understand. After this second short break, in part 3, I'm going to look at a potted history regarding BUFORA and some of the theories of what the two 7-year-olds may have encountered back in the May of 1973.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07 852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk, or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
Bufora, which is short for the British UFO Research Association, is a non-cultist and scientifically evaluative organisation that was formed in 1962. Sorry about that. It was put together by several UFO research organisations and individuals who between them formed at an inaugural meeting in Kensington, London in the United Kingdom, with these societies including the British Flying Saucer Bureau and the London UFO Research Organisation, along with a few early magazine producers and individual private investigators. The Bufora Journal was produced from 1962 under various different titles and was the mainstay of contact for members until the website took over exclusively in 2005. However, it is rumoured that a magazine format of the journal may return in the future. For over half a century, hundreds of cases have been published in the Bufora Journal, and special study booklets have been produced as an ongoing focus on all aspects of the UFO phenomena, with conferences being staged since the 1960s at regular frequencies, and as well as the organisation's annual conference being held at Sheffield Hallam University since 1987. They also hold various other meetings across the country, with Rendlesham Forest being a frequent spot for gatherings. And just in case you do not know the connection between UFOs and Rendlesham Forest, just type Rendlesham Forest incident into your browser bar. Throughout history, Bufora has continued to be a major contributor and consultant to news, documentaries and articles over the decades, with many prominent UFO authors as part of its team, and since the 1970s the association has run a specialist training course in UFO and UAP investigations. Bufora has also formed a code of practice for investigators which continues to this present day, with all the reports in every case being led by the witness. In 1997, the organisation was reported to have around 1,000 members and investigates over 400 cases a year, with the organisation reporting that 95% of these cases as being hoaxes. Bufora also holds witness support groups for those who believe they have encountered extraterrestrials, and they have been outspoken critics of the UK government's Freedom of Information Act as it refers to UFOs and the UFO phenomena. And, according to their website, the organisation adopts an open and analytical view to all cases and reported categories and continues to explore the UFO phenomena with an open mind, with no belief systems or exclusive theories with its continuing investigations. Bufora held their 50th anniversary in London in 2012. Bufora first recorded the details of the Sam the Sandown Clown encounter after interviewing the two children, Fred and Becky, which is the only documented appearance of this mysterious figure. No spacecraft or even terrestrial vehicle was ever observed at the time of this rather odd incident, and it was only the two children that saw and spoke to the entity, with his metallic self-made hut having disappeared before any further research could be carried out. The two children were insistent that this encounter with Sam the Sandown Clown really did happen to them, and, as far as I can tell, they still remain adamant today, even though the entity disappeared as mysteriously as he appeared. Sam the Sandown Clown continues to live on in local legend and folklore, being immortalised with each retelling, and continues to captivate. There are, of course, several explanations as to what Sam the Sandown Clown could have actually been, with the simplest explanation being that the whole encounter was a hoax, and that it was more than likely just children exploring whilst on holiday playing games of make-believe, with the entity just being the star role of what could have been nothing more than a children's pastime. But other theories include a human wearing a costume, a fairy, a ghost, or some other type of paranormal or supernatural creature, a robot, an extraterrestrial that might be possibly wearing a costume, or even a shared hallucination, otherwise known as footbridge, with the children having this shared experience as a way to process some trauma they may have endured that day. On a very quick interesting side note here, and for those who might not know, a footbridge, which is a French word for madness of two, is a shared psychosis or shared delusional disorder that is a rare psychiatric syndrome in which symptoms of a delusional belief are transmitted from one individual to another. The disorder itself has been depicted frequently in popular culture, namely in films, TV series, books, and music. Perhaps there was indeed a Sam, but it was easier for the two children to imagine him as a clown rather than the odd creature that he claimed to be. Or maybe this man named Sam was under the influence of some drink or other substance, or had mental health issues, which then led the children to mistakenly perceive him as an otherworldly being. Some followers of this strange tale say that Sam's strange answers to the children's questions regarding as to whether he was a ghost or not to mean that he was, in fact, some kind of spirit. But however you look at it, Becky's father seemingly believes that this Sam was not only an alien, but was also something or someone who had invited his daughter and her friend Freddie into a strange bubble outside of normal human perception in order to share information. And the fact that Becky's account was also published in the British UFO Research Association's journal does add some more credence in favour of Sam the Sandown Clown as being an alien.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 153, we are going to be looking at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was a psychiatric hospital located in Western West Virginia for the insane. from the October of 1864 until the May of 1994. The lack of proper care and access to sanitation led to a large number of deaths at the mental hospital. While the official count of patients who died at the retreat are not available, research is currently underway to determine an accurate count, with the death count said to be estimated to be in or above the 5-figure area.
This show was written and researched by me, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The pronunciations of all the names of places was all mine. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Poolar, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And, of course, a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World podcast, but if you do know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, which include ufology, hauntings, disasters and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as true crime, unsolved crime and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I'll see what I can do. I'll also include the name of the person who suggested the idea in the end credits of the podcast if they're happy for me to do so, of course. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any other of the podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember, guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by basic copyright of Mark the Medium.